Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 249 and 250. Now, this is a two-part story arc that really starts off to remind us the X-Men are going through another shift. Let me explain. So as we dive into today's story arc, we do pick up with the idea of being reminded that the X-Men had now recently lost 4 different team members. That's half their team now gone. Wolverine left to go on his own for a short period of time. Longshot also left, but Longshot left to figure out who he was, to discover his missing origin. Now, when it came to Storm, she died at the end of our last video. When she tried to stop the nanny and orphan maker from getting away, Havoc tried to blast their ship, but also hit Storm as well, killing her off. And when it comes to Rogue, she walked through the siege perilous. And so unfortunately, the team is now been cut in half. And the question is right now, what direction will the team go in now with their boss being gone, but also some other hard hitters being gone as well? Now, when it comes to Havoc, he's very upset with himself, which honestly he should be, because he is technically the reason why Storm was killed off at the end of our last video for Uncanny X-Men. And so for him, he's just punishing himself, talking down about himself. Now, it does get to the point where he does get very upset with the computer, because out of nowhere, the computer begins to replay what exactly happened in that battle up to the moment where Storm was killed off. And so for him, he hated the idea of seeing that. He tries to blast the computer. Now, here's the problem with that, because the blast did send a feedback, making him fly across the room, knocking him out once he hit the ground again. But after being knocked out, the computer begins to heal back up after being damaged by Havoc, but also a phone call comes in, and the phone call comes from Polaris. Now, something we have to remember when it comes to Polaris, and we're going way back here, but we have to jump back over to the Mutant Massacre, that when it came to Polaris, she was possessed by Malice, this random mutant who's really pure energy that has the ability to possess your body. And for a long time, Polaris was just gone because her body and mind was in control by Malice. Now, in recent events, Polaris was able to regain control of her body, but Malice is still inside of her. And matter of fact, you have Malice just playing mind games with her, saying, "How dare you call Havoc? You already know he moved on to Madeline Pryor," which honestly, she is right, because there was that point where Havoc said, you know what, Polaris is now evil because of Malice. Let me go ahead and move on to somebody else like Madeline. Now, Madeline's dead, so technically Havoc is a free agent again. But again, it's her just playing mind games with Polaris, to the point where you do have Polaris use her powers to blow up the phone booth, which of course does catch the attention of 2 guys who were nearby, and they find Polaris somewhat injured but wanting to take care of her. Now, one of the guys walks off to find a first aid kit, but then something or someone kills him. We also get reminded that there's going to be a new group of villains going after the X-Men very soon, and that would be the Reavers. Now, we had talked about the Reavers before, because when it comes to the latest base that's currently being used by the X-Men, it used to belong to the Reavers, but you had the X-Men run them out of the place and they took over the place. Now, here's the thing, because recently Lady Deathstrike and Donald Pierce had joined the group, and their main goal is to kill off the X-Men. Now, for Lady Deathstrike, her main goal is to kill off Wolverine, but of course, because she's part of this team, she has to help out the others to kill off the rest of the X-Men. Now, I want to jump back over to Havoc, and there is a good reason why. Let me explain. So when it comes to Havoc, he's been woken up by Psylocke, and this is really more of Psylocke kind of putting herself in the position of team lead. Because right now, Storm is dead, and usually if Storm is not around, it would be Wolverine. But Wolverine is also not around, and so that role is now left open for her to officially take. But for Havoc, he's not really down with the idea of her being the team lead. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she's also informing Havoc that there was a message left behind on the computer. Now, let's not forget, when Havoc blew up the computer, there was a huge feedback from the explosion that sent him flying across the room that knocked him out. And when he was knocked out, Polaris called, but apparently somebody was able to collect the message from her. But the question is who? Was it another member of the X-Men or possibly the computer? Or is there someone else on the base at the moment and no one knows? Either way, you didn't have Havoc being able to use the computer after it had repaired itself and being able to locate where the phone call came from. And so you have the X-Men begin to head over there to help out Polaris. Now we jump over to Polaris, who is currently getting some medical help at a bar. But while getting the medical help from the guy who found her earlier, out of nowhere, you have a bunch of random characters just barge into the room and beginning to kill off every single person in the bar to hopefully get to Polaris. Now, Polaris is able to realize that these guys came from the Savage Land, but she's also confused on why in the world these guys are here for her. Now, we come to find out the X-Men do arrive in time to help out the people of the city deal with this problem with all these different random characters trying to attack their homes, but also trying to get to Polaris. We come to find out that these characters are better known as mutates from the Savage Land. Now remember, mutates are different than mutants. Let me explain. So mutates are people who have gained their abilities through radiation, kind of like the Hulk did. And so when it comes to the mutates, they're from the Savage Land, but they have been hit with radiation to gain different kinds of abilities. Now, even though we now know who they are, the question is, why are they here in this city? But either way, you do have the mutates being able to just wreak havoc across the city, but you have the X-Men being able to take most of them out. But we kind of find out who is the actual leader of the group of mutates. It's a character known as Zaladane. Now, when it comes to Zaladane, she's been around for a good while in Marvel Comics. But here's the thing about Zaladane. You see, she used to be the sun god worshiper. She used to worship the sun god of the Savage Land for a very long time, up to the point where she became the assistant to the High Evolutionary back in the Evolutionary War. As a matter of fact, we cover the entire story arc there. But when it came to the High Evolutionary, once he left, Zaladane went in a different direction, where she began to build up an army of different mutates from the Savage Land to come here for two supposed reasons. The first is that this city here in South America, its port has been doing damage to the water of Antarctica, where of course the Savage Land is actually located at. But on top of that, she's here for her sister, and apparently her sister is Polaris. Now here's the thing, Marvel never did confirm the idea that these two characters are sisters, but she does believe that she actually is the sister to Polaris. Now when it comes to the X-Men, they're trying to make a deal with her to tell her, leave now, take your army with you and leave these people alone. But on top of that, we'll make sure they do no harm to the waters near the Savage Land. But on top of that, if you do leave, your last few survivors of your group will not get a beat down from us. And so you do have Zaladane retreat with her army, but she also takes Polaris with her. Now, while they are leaving, they have no idea that Havoc has put on some clothes to look like he came from the Savage Land to go with Zaladane to hopefully save Polaris from her. Now, when it comes to Zaladane, she does head back over to Antarctica with her army. But here's the thing. You see, as soon as they arrived, out of nowhere, you have this big tower just pop out of the ground. Now, most likely, this tower belonged to the High Evolutionary when he was in the Savage Land. But he left back in the Evolutionary War. And really, all the tech that she is currently using came from the High Evolutionary. Now, she does tell us that she does plan on using a machine known as the Transmutator. Now, when it comes to the Transmutator, we're going to learn what it does here in a moment, but it does scare another character known as Brainchild. Now, when it comes to Brainchild, he was one of the mutates that was actually created by Magneto back when Magneto was the ruler of the Savage Land, where he gave different natives small doses of radiation to see if they would gain abilities. And so there goes Brainchild. He's super intelligent, but he's not on the same level as the High Evolutionary. And so he's having a hard time understanding the complete idea of what this machine can actually do and what other things could it possibly do for Zaladane. Now, let's not forget that you still have Havoc pretending to be one of the soldiers for Zaladane. But of course, he does blow his cover because he wants to save Polaris. Now, here's the problem though. It's just him against an entire army of soldiers who work for Zaladane. The X-Men did follow Havoc, but they're on the outside of the base. And so unfortunately, Havoc is on his own and he is easily taken down. Now, after being taken down, you then have Zaladane use a machine on Polaris, and we kind of find out that she is now absorbing the abilities of Polaris for her own. So now she can control metal if she wants to. Now, there is another character I do want to talk about, and that would be the character known as Worm. Now, when it comes to Worm, he has the ability to control people, but in a very interesting kind of way. Let me explain. So when it comes to Worm, he has the ability to control you by releasing a bunch of liquid out of his suction cups from his hands over your entire body. And once that liquid is able to get all over your skin, into your body and brain, he then has full control over you, making him a very interesting kind of mind controller. But either way, when it comes to our good old character Zaladane, she used Worm as a way to control different people from the Savage Land who are not trying to work with her, as she's trying to build a kingdom inside of Savage Land. Now, like I said earlier, the rest of the X-Men were following behind Havoc, except they're currently on the outside of the base of Zaladane. But here's the thing, you have Psylocke believing that she can take down the entire organization of Zaladane by herself, because she did use her ability to read the minds of different people to get an idea of what's exactly happening inside the tower. But when she dives into the water that could possibly lead her inside the tower, something begins to take over her. Now, you have Colossus also jump in the water to save her, but again, something else takes over him as well. And we kind of find out that Worm had put the same kind of liquid from his suction cups into the water so that he is able to control the bodies of both Psylocke and Colossus, where you have Colossus trying to kill off Psylocke. Now, when it comes to Dazzler, you have Colossus tell her, use your powers to shoot my arm off. Do something to stop me, because right now I'm about to kill off our team leader here. But then Worm comes behind Dazzler and bam, just like that, he gets her as well. And the whole entire X-Men are now under his control. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she did not exactly die, but her mind does enter some kind of state where it's not like, okay, she's gone to heaven or hell or she's in limbo, but her mind is currently being connected to Gateway, who's back at the base of the X-Men. And when it comes to this dream state she's in right now, it seems like it's Gateway trying to tell her, do not come back to your base, because if you do, most likely you are going to die. The X-Men are going to die. The only way to escape death is use the Siege Perilous. Now, I'm not going to sit down and explain what that is once again in this video because it's the only time it pops up, but it will play an important role in later videos when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. But either way, you did have Psylocke realize that it was Gateway trying to give her a message. Now, when it comes to the rest of the X-Men, you have Havoc and Polaris being kept in a prison underneath the tower, where of course Havoc might go through some kind of torture and Polaris just there until Zaladane feels like she has another purpose for Polaris. Now, when it comes to Polaris, she's trying to break free, which she will, but not in the way you are actually thinking. Now, when it comes to the rest of the X-Men, they're being talked down to by Zaladane, but we also come to find out that Kazar, a native of the Savage Land, and his wife and child are also prisoners of Zaladane as well. Now, when it comes to Zaladane, she wants to make a point here that she's now the new ruler of the Savage Land, and so she tells Worm to tell Colossus to go ahead and kill off the son of Kazar, which honestly is pretty brutal, but luckily it does not happen in this book, but it seems like it's about to happen. Now, getting back over to Polaris, this is the moment where we kind of find out that she has a second ability, superhuman strength. And with this strength, she is able to break out of the chains that had her bound to the wall and being able to take down a few soldiers that were following Zaladane. Now, once you have Polaris being able to free Havoc, you then have our two heroes being able to mind connect with Psylocke. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she's still being controlled by Worm, but her body is, not her mind. And so with that being said, she is able to use the body of Havoc while Polaris uses her new super strength to help the rest of the X-Men break free from the control of Worm, but to also fight against the forces of Zaladane. Now, the battle does technically end when it comes to Havoc giving her one heck of a blast to send her flying out of her own tower. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to Havoc, he was trying to kill her. He was not trying to just knock her out. He was trying to kill her off. And really, when it comes to Havoc, just in case Zaladane's still alive after the first blast, he tries to blow up the entire tower, hoping to kill her off for sure, but also her followers as well. Now, his blast does get bounced back only because Zaladane did wake up after the first blast and was able to protect her home, but also herself and her people. Now, when it comes to the rest of the X-Men, they realize that when it comes to Havoc, he was trying to kill her. He was not trying to, make sure she's knocked out or just do some heavy damage to her home. No, he wanted to make sure that she was dead and buried in the ground. And the rest of the X-Men are having a hard time deciding what he did was right or was it wrong. But the story does get wrapped up when you have the X-Men get teleported back over to their base. And the question is right now, like we saw earlier, are the X-Men are going to die because now they're back home at their base? But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.